In our last episode, Mahmud II stood alone, sick, exhausted, but unbending. Even from his bed he issued decrees, rebuilt fleets, counted subjects, and drafted codes. He had torn down the Janissaries, wrestled with Egypt, invited Europe in, and bound his empire to reforms that would outlive him. The Iron Sultan, who had ruled for over 30 years, was breathing his last. Now his twilight hour had come. This is road to destruction, the world wars. The Sultan was dying. For years, tuberculosis had hollowed Mahmud II, the man who had once stormed the barracks of the Janissaries, who had ruled with fire and iron, now coughed blood into his handkerchief. His body wasted, his voice faltered, but his pen never stopped moving. Decrees flowed, even as his strength failed, a ruler trying to outpace his own mortality. In June 1839, Mahmud breathed his last. For 31 years he had ruled, longer than most of his ancestors in these turbulent centuries. His reign had been survival, reform, defiance, and compromise. Now the Iron Sultan was gone. Istanbul mourned, but uneasily. His funeral was a pageant of power and fragility. Cannon fire boomed across the Bosphorus. Prayers rose in every mosque, and the empire gathered to honor its fallen ruler. But beneath the mourning hung a darker question. What now? Mahmud left behind an empire transformed, but unfinished. He had abolished the Janissaries, but his new army had already been broken by Egypt. He had rebuilt the fleet, only to see it sail into the hands of his enemy and burn. He had introduced censuses, civil codes, embassies, and shipyards, each a step toward modernity, each also a new chain binding Istanbul to Europe and destroying the links to the past. His reign had been a war of decrees against decay, and he had won just enough to keep the empire alive. But survival is not salvation. Mahmud's empire was a house under construction with its builder gone. The tools were laid out, the foundations had been poured, but the structure itself was fragile, exposed, and unfinished. Whether it would endure depended not on him, but on the boy who now inherited it. Abdul Majid. Abdul Majid's childhood was spent in the shadow of a father who ruled with iron and fire. The young prince grew up within the guarded walls of the palace, where lessons began at dawn and ended at dusk. His mother, Besmi Sultan, a woman of quiet piety and strong will, guided much of his upbringing. She instilled in him a taste for charity and education, virtues that would mark his reign as surely as his father's severity had marked his own. Tutors filled the boy's world with books and languages. He learned Arabic and Persian, but also French, the language of diplomacy, the tongue of Europe. He listened eagerly, repeating phrases until he spoke with fluency. He was the first Ottoman prince to master it, and the fact did not go unnoticed by foreign ambassadors. To them, he was already a bridge, a boy who could move easily between the old world of Istanbul and the salons of Paris. Yet, beneath the surface lay fragility. Abdul Majid was no warrior. He did not ride at the head of regiments as his ancestors had. He played music, read poetry, and entertained tutors with questions about Europe's sciences and philosophies. Courtiers found him gentle, well-mannered, even soft. To reformers, he was the ideal ruler for a new age. Curious, cosmopolitan, unburdened by Janissary violence or old rivalries. To skeptics, he was a boy, unready for the storms that awaited him. A 16-year-old prince, more scholar than soldier, quiet, impressionable, untested. His palace education had kept him safe from the blood and terror that had defined his father's reign. He had not faced the court of Mustafa, never hidden in the baths. It meant that when the hour came, he would inherit not only an empire in crisis, but a throne for which nothing in his sheltered life had prepared him. The ministers who had served his father now looked to him, fearful and uncertain. Reformers saw hope, conservatives saw weakness, foreign ambassadors saw opportunity. And across the horizon, Egypt loomed, stronger than ever, with Ibrahim Pasha's army poised and waiting. The empire's survival hung not on Mahmud's decrees, but on the choices of his son, and on the mercy, or threat, of Europe, and the shadow of a vassal who might rise again. The Iron Sultan was gone. The world that replaced him was more fragile, more uncertain, more dangerous. One sick man had perished, but a greater sickness lingered, and all Europe watched to see whether the empire itself would soon waste away. In our next episode, The Boy Sultan and the Broken Empire, Abdul Majid steps onto the throne. The Ottomans will bury one sultan and crown another, but the frail empire he inherits is already teetering on the edge of collapse. This is Road to Destruction, The World Wars.